Figure it out if we want to start and someone comes in late. They'll get the gist of it.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi!
Thank you for coming. We are going to talk about some of the most iconic foods and potions from video games. We're going to go into all the different kinds of things, and I'm going to talk in the end about how to make them. And I'm just going to get started because I will get distracted if I don't. All right, so this is my co-panelist, James. He wrote Cooking with Wolverine with me. He also has a Call of Duty oral history book coming out, and he also writes for Marvel mobile games, and he also did the Rick and Morty official cookbook.
And Cassandra here, who's going to be ringleading and has masterminded this panel in a tremendous way. You'll see a breadth and scope that will shock and delight you. Is an expert writer in this field, got famous, known as the Geeky Chef, through her own blog in the late 2000s, and that segued into publishing her first, which was the first book? The Video Game Chef?
Actually, my first book is not here. It is the Geeky Chef cookbook.
Okay, the Geeky Chef, oh yes, okay.
Right.
And then went on to publish several of her own ones and has been now recruited to do officially licensed ones, such as the Mass Effect cocktail book, the Starfield recipe book, and the Wolverine one that we just had come out together. And your upcoming one is Diablo?
Yes, there's a Diablo cocktail book, and also next year there will be an official Fallout cocktail book.
And the Diablo one is next month, right?
Yes, Diablo is next month, November 11th.
And you've got a QR code for that at the table. We'll bring that up later anyway.
All right. That's us. So I just wanted to point this out because, people think Wolverine, nothing to do with video games, but we did throw in a little Easter egg in the Wolverine cookbook. The manual for the NES Wolverine game has this really descriptive burger, and we decided to throw that in there for everyone who's played that game. Okay, so as sort of a means of introduction, James and I are going to talk about basically what video game foods had most impacted us, and had a big impression on us personally. The first one is going to sort of explain the entire trajectory of my career. It's the first strong video game memory that I have, and it's the first game that I connected with on a deeper level. And that game is Monkey Island. So, of course, that food is grog. Grog is kind of the perfect video game food. It's not just memorable, it's functional. It's doing so many things in this game. For one, it has an ingredients list, which is always appreciated as someone who recreates video games foods professionally, although in this case, not super useful. It does tell me that grog contains rum, and it also tells me that grog is acidic, which is a hint for how you use grog later in the game. So grog is doing a lot, like I said. World building, for one. Sorry. It's a little delayed. So grog is a historical beverage associated with pirates and sailors. So it's doing that, but it's also setting the tone, which is, it's not that serious. Grog in Monkey Island is nothing like historical grog. And then it's also a running gag in the series to have anachronistic items that are out of time and place. And another thing it's doing is puzzle solving. There's multiple hints about how you use grog before you actually use it, which is acidic. And then lastly, and this is for most point-and-click adventures, most items are going to be key items, but grog is a key item. You need to use grog to progress the story. The only non-key item in Monkey Island is the stable remover, though. All right. Which brings me to my second most impactful video game food, and this was the video game food that changed my life, and it's from The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. And I just want to throw that in there. So one of the dungeons in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is called the Snow Peak Ruins, where a pair of married Yetis live, Yeto and Yetta. But Yetta is sick, and so instead of collecting keys to unlock different areas of the dungeon, you're collecting ingredients for a soup to make Yetta feel better. And each time you bring an ingredient back to Yeto, he or Yetta unlocks another area of the dungeon. So in adding another layer of immersion, the soup also acts as a consumable. So the more ingredients you add to the soup, the more the soup becomes powerful, a more powerful healing potion. So there are, the ingredients for the soup are fish, pumpkin, and goat cheese. And this combination really intrigued me. It's not a very usual combination. And I was determined to make this soup in real life. And this was my second playthrough of the game because it had been out for a couple of years at this point. And I thought, surely someone has made a recipe for this. But this was back in 2008, and it was the Wild West of food blogging. So YouTube was only a few years old, and Instagram didn't exist yet. There were not a lot of websites doing fandom foods yet, and the ones that were there were mostly focused on, you know, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, singular fandoms, the really big pillars of the nerd community. And so there were few, if any, recipes for video game foods floating around. And so after a lot of searching, I couldn't find a single recipe for Yeto soup. And I thought, I'm gonna have to do this myself. And at the time, I was living in this apartment that we affectionately called the shoebox. It had no heating, no windows. It was like a shared bathroom for the entire floor, and a kitchenette that basically only had like a mini fridge and a sink. So I didn't really have a lot of means to make this thing. And it's not moving to the next slide. Okay, but my brother also lived in the building, and he had a nicer apartment upstairs with a full kitchen. So I took the bus to the nearest grocery store, which was about like 40 minutes away, food desert, and got the ingredients, and I brought them to his place to cook. And the whole ordeal definitely felt like the most epic side quest. But the soup was everything I thought it would be. And that's when I started the blog that would become the Geeky Chef. And it was one of the first blogs to regularly feature video game foods. And Yeto soup is still one of the most popular recipes on that blog. So now James is going to talk about stuff.
Well, you know, to explain how I ended up in the cookbook world, really, I don't cook, and that was my first fearful question when they contacted me about writing for this. I was like, I don't know how this would be a horrible failure, and they're like, no, we pair you with brilliant professional chefs. And I was like, what they want is people who know the various universes and sort of speak to the lore of those different worlds. And that's wordsmithery I'm much more comfortable with than kitchen tools. I can't cut off chunks of my fingers with my words, or have not found a way to yet. So luckily that has been the beauty of these, is I get to find and explore really thoughtful recipes through people who actually know how to bring out great taste and culinary discovery that helps take you even deeper through it. So I'm grateful to have been brought into your company and collaboration through that.
Thank you. Okay, so food is obviously important, and gamers, we want to recreate food from video games, as evidenced by the success of the many blogs, pages, channels like Geeky Chef who tackle video game foods, and the many successful video game themed cookbooks out there. And yes, I put myself on there multiple times. It's mine, my presentation. So sometimes when this is discussed, it's labeled as like this trend or a fad, but the reality is the connection between video gaming and food has been fairly symbiotic from the beginning. The trend is just sort of the newest manifestation of a very, very established connection. So this is our next section, the beginning, when food sold games and games sold food. So it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when the first video game appeared in a food. The answer is probably the text-adventure games of the 70s, which were themselves inspired by Dungeons & Dragons. But in broader trends, the first video game food most people probably encountered was Pac-Man, the Pac-Man cherry. Arcade games at the time mostly involved like shooting things before Pac-Man, and so most of the consumers were boys and young men. And Namco believed that food could potentially attract new demographics, especially girls and young women. And they were right. The game drew in millions of new players across arcades worldwide. And after Pac-Man's success, game developers pretty quickly realized the power of food imagery in video games, which led to games like Burger Time and Food Fight, just to name a few. And so video games and food start to have sort of the symbiotic relationship. Arcades and cabinets were often strategically placed near food courts, inside restaurants, even grocery stores. And this was done to maximize basically the time spent inside the arcade, and it also kept people buying food. So it was this win-win situation. And then food brands also realized the power of games in exposure and selling their products, which led to a succession of branded food games, often featuring food mascots and protagonists. These games varied in quality, but many were nonetheless iconic and commercially successful. Most people probably recognize Tapper, which was originally made to advertise Budweiser beer. I personally love Cool Spot as a 90s kid. Hello. Sorry. It's like not wanting to go to the next one. Okay. So the relationship hasn't changed. It just sort of evolved, and then we get things like the cup noodle advertisement in Final Fantasy 15, and I think it's called I Love You, Colonel Sanders, which is, it's on my list. I gotta play it.
Yeah, I always think about this as food was the gateway drug that I could access when my parents were refusing to buy a Nintendo, but I was playing some over at my friends' houses, and I was so addicted it was consuming my thoughts for when I could go back to hang out with the kid I didn't even like that much, but because I liked his Nintendo, I'd put up with him, and I can so vividly remember the all the snacks we would load up with for those, but also it made me a sucker for anything that tied in. So as gross as it was, I would eat the Nintendo cereal with this sort of two pillars inside of one of a Zelda cereal and one of a Mario, because it was the closest I could get on my daily at-home life. And then things like, wanting any kind of contest where we could win the Nintendo my parents wouldn't buy. So it got me to buy tons of bags of Doritos that I remember them running some contests as well. So many of my early memories did tie food to video games, both through the marketing end or through hoping that it could be my gateway to winning this stuff. And I think that you just see that continue to this day as well.
Yes, absolutely. So that brings us to our next section. Now that we've covered sort of the origin stories, we can get into sort of the nitty-gritty of things. So one of the more ubiquitous consumables in games are the health potion, and to a slightly lesser degree, the magic or the mana potion. Again, it's really difficult to pinpoint exactly when this first appeared, and again, it was most likely in the D&D inspired games from the 70s, like for instance, Zork had potion-like ingredients in 1977. And Rogue used the question mark symbol to represent potions in 1980. But for the most mainstream players, this was the first time we saw potions on screen, with the red and blue bottles becoming sort of a template for health and magic restoration items, respectively, in countless later games. Here's just a handful of a small handful of iconic games with red health potions. And with the exception of Prince of Persia, which didn't have a mana system, these games also have a blue magic restoration potion. But the health potion doesn't always come in red. Sometimes, in Final Fantasy, it kind of changes from game to game. And the healing potion isn't even always a potion. Sometimes it's milk, a plant, a health drink, a soda, an injectable, a soup, an entire fairy. The Zelda series has done some particularly interesting things with bottles. But all of these are shorthand for the same basic concept, which is restoration. Dragon Buster is credited as being one of the first games with a visible health bar. In that game, the player could eat mushrooms or drink potions to restore or extend their health, which are very familiar concepts in gaming. Restoration items are a necessary mechanism in a lot of games, no matter the genre. And what better way to represent that than through food and eating? We eat to restore and then nourish ourselves in real life, so it follows that we eat to restore our health in games. But in early games, that meant that food showed up in some very interesting places. Inside walls, on the floor, inside trash cans, on pipes, bursting from the corpses of your enemies. I really love just the chicken in the pile of bones. That's one of my favorites. So it's not always about health restoration either. Food can give the player various buffs. Here's what many would consider the most iconic video game food, Mario's red mushroom. This red mushroom not only makes Mario more resilient, he can now take an extra hit, it also makes him bigger and stronger and allows him to break blocks. Mario's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, has implied that the idea of power-giving foods, like the Super Mario mushroom, was inspired by European folktales and stories where mysterious food items have magical effects, like Alice in Wonderland. And equally important, perhaps even more important, is the green mushroom. And the one-up uses food to represent another chance, a new game, another turn. The idea dates back to pinball machines of the 1960s, and it was later adapted for arcade games. The one-up, or the life turn system, is not as common in modern titles, but it remains one of the most iconic concepts in gaming, represented by this mushroom. Super Mario Bros. Was among the first games to visualize an extra life as a consumable item.
And then I'm a particular fan of Call of Duty's Perca-Colas. I think maybe I'm a much more processed food generation person, but I think the fact that rather than eating holistically grown things like mushrooms, it makes sense to me. We have chemical-dosed sodas that keep us going literally while we're playing our games, and then that's also the power-up in game to double your speed, double your accuracy, anything of that nature. But I also love they go the extra mile and they created jingles for all the different sodas. So even if you're not a first-person shooter person, you might enjoy just a trip down YouTube of all the made-up jingles in their hellscape world that they make for their sodas.
Okay, so that brings us to food as a reward and motivation. So games use food to encourage, motivate, and reward players for many, many things. Exploring new areas, opening containers, solving puzzles, defeating enemies, rewarding player curiosity, skill, and persistence through something every player will instinctively understand, which is the necessity and the satisfaction of eating. Food as a necessity is a well-understood concept because without food, we die. And some games incorporate that into gameplay, adding another layer of strategy. The first Ultima game was among the first games to have a visible hunger meter separate from a health meter or hit points. It's represented by a numeric food counter, and the counter decreases over time as the player performs actions like moving or fighting. If the food counter reaches 0, the character dies, regardless of their hit points. So the hunger meter, a somewhat controversial mechanic, has appeared in many games since Ultima, including most of its sequels. And so Organ Trail is one of the earliest examples of food as both a necessary resource and a reward. In the early versions of the game, player typed bang to shoot, and how quickly or accurately you typed the word directly impacted how much food you were awarded. Players then had to ration the food they brought back to make it last through periods of scarcity or illness. Food was both a tangible reward for skill and timing, and like Ultima and Rogue, a resource to manage. And later versions of the game included graphics. The hunting minigame was updated. This is probably what most of us remember. At this game, the game incorporated like 6 different animals, which was the squirrel, the rabbit, the deer, the elk, the bear, and of course the most coveted, the bison, which was big and slow and rewarded the player with over 800 pounds of meat when shot. But of course, we weren't allowed to keep that.
And I just have to weigh in that was, for me as a child, separate from food, the thing that made me first get angry at game developers. And I think we can all relate to that feeling, but as a child, when you tell me I capture 800 pounds of meat, but I can only bring 100, and then like 3 screens later, you tell me someone died of starvation, I blame you, game developer, that I wasn't allowed to bring, especially if like I already had 2 people die of dysentery, then I have that much more weight I can keep in the wagon, and the 100 should go up. I should now be able to carry that much more for what I lost of the people. Anyway, that's not about food. It's just about that feeling we all have when we realize the people behind the scenes are making our lives hell. So, okay.
Got it off your chest?
Yeah, it's just when I was 7 years old. That was my first meta experience of being angry at whoever made it.
Yeah, I think we all relate. Okay, so pivoting to modern games where food is a necessity, food plays a subtle but interesting role in Baldur's Gate 3. The player needs a certain amount of food to take long rests. And these rests aren't just simple restoration, they're opportunities to connect with your companions and advance their individual storylines. So gathering enough food becomes a motivation for a narrative reward. And food is often a reward and motivation in real life. Yeah, we eat to survive, but on a practical level, we also use food to celebrate effort and achievement. And nothing represents that better than cake. Not only is cake universally appealing, it's often associated with celebrations, particularly celebrations of achievement or milestones, like birthdays, weddings, graduations. We have extremely positive associations with cake, which is why it's so often used in video games to symbolize reward, celebration, and progress. And you all knew where this was going. So Portal's iconic villain GLaDOS gleefully exploits our very human desire for a sweet, sweet cake to mark our achievements. And throughout Portal, it quickly becomes clear that GLaDOS never actually intended to give us the cake. After her vindictive experiments, the infamous "the cake is a lie" line essentially became gamer shorthand for a false promise, a bait and switch, or a sham reward. But GLaDOS got her starchy comeuppance in Portal 2 when her personality cores transformed into a potato. Okay, and so beyond consumables and power-ups, developers utilize food to add detail to the environment and to enhance their stories. Sometimes food is literally the environment. The food level is a popular design choice for platformers and racing games. These zones are usually full of vibrant colors and textures with lots of playful details. Basically, these levels are a feast for the eyes. It's a whole world where players can indulge in the fantasy of abundance. Everyone's inner child has dreamed of diving into a pool of chocolate or cheese, and the food level makes that dream a reality. Conversely, food can be used to illustrate scarcity. So here's a little thing I like to call dumpster diving through dystopia. The foods in these post-apocalyptic or dystopian games are at least memorable, if not always appealing. These developers are basically using food to emphasize their world's harsh realities. Fallout's a really good example of that. One of the most famous of these is the Nuka-Cola from Fallout. A parody of Coca-Cola, Nuka-Cola is showing us that out of all of humanity's creations, only a soda with flawless branding made it through the apocalypse relatively unscathed. And we see this phenomena living on in games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Starfield, with a lot of available food being either synthetic or from questionable sources. In both games, take sort of utilitarian and convenience foods to their logical extreme with kibble and chunks, respectively. Food is often used for comedy, parody, or social commentary in games. Developers use food to poke fun at consumer culture and corporate branding, often with fictional food brands and over-the-top dishes like the foul wrap from Grand Theft Auto or Joja Cola from Stardew Valley. And beyond world building, food is also a powerful tool for character development and narrative. For instance, in the Star Ocean series, each party member has a favorite food, and knowing that food helps the player build sort of affinity with that character. Which makes sense, because food can reveal a lot about a person's personality and background. In the Elder Scrolls arena, the sweet roll is used to test players' moral instincts and personality during character creation. The game asks the player, what will you do if someone steals your delicious prize? And what the player selects will help determine the player's class, which of course became a running gag in countless future Bethesda games. So speaking of running gags, many video game characters have a favorite or signature food. This little quirk of having a favorite food kind of makes the character feel more real. Food preferences are something that everyone can relate to. These characters are just like us, some more than others. Looking at you, Naked Snake. And of course, some video game characters make eating food their whole entire personality, which I find relatable. Food preferences are so often tied to identity and memory, which is why food can also represent an emotional connection in games. The elixir soup from the Wind Waker embodied the comfort of home and family. And to really emphasize this, it's the most powerful restoration item in the game. It restores both Link's health and mana. In the first Kingdom Hearts game, the Palpable fruit represents an unbreakable connection between two people. According to the legend of Destiny Island, those who share it are said to have their destinies intertwined forever. And then in Kingdom Hearts 2, sea salt ice cream is used to represent feelings of nostalgia and camaraderie. It's a sweet tradition that's shared amongst friends, which is a common childhood memory for most of us, sharing an ice cream or like from an ice cream truck, for instance. And Toriel's butterscotch cinnamon pie is a symbol of care and kindness in a seemingly hostile world. So food is one of the most universal ways that we express love and care to one another, sharing a home-cooked meal with your loved ones, making soup for a sick friend, taking a romantic partner out to a special restaurant. So food is intrinsically tied to memory, culture, and emotion, which is why it's such a powerful and effective tool for world building and narrative design. You have anything to add? No? Okay. So, when food and potions offer gameplay benefits and opportunities for world building, developers began introducing systems that let players craft items and create a variety of consumables. Early games like King's Quest used alchemy as a puzzle-solving mechanic. To progress the story, you had to collect ingredients, follow recipes, and mix potions. Alchemy in later games has shifted to creating consumables that the player can use for various buffs or restoring health, mana, or stamina. The Witcher series, alchemy is central to the Witcher profession, so it's no surprise that the game's alchemy system, especially that first game, was particularly complex. Players gather herbs, monster parts, other ingredients found through their adventures, and then experiment with various combinations to craft oils, bombs, and potions. And experimentation was key to discovering new combinations, but it also came with a risk of losing ingredients and getting damaged. And you also had to be careful how much potion you were using because the toxicity effect. So it required careful planning and strategy. Sometimes alchemy is more interactive. Kingdom Come Deliverance took a really detailed approach to alchemy. Some might even call it tedious. The game requires the players to measure, grind, and boil ingredients in the correct amount and time. An early example of food crafting or cooking was in Ultima 7 in 1992. In this game, the players could combine flour and water to make dough, and then bake the dough in the oven to make bread. And this neat little feature was a level of interaction with the environment that was relatively rare for the time. And then a couple of years later, Earthbound had the condiment system. And while you couldn't create new food in Earthbound, you could add a condiment to a compatible food item to change or enhance the properties of your food. Often those didn't make much sense, but they were still fun and memorable. Some of the most robust food crafting systems come from MMORPGs, which are designed to keep the players engaged long term. Their food crafting systems offer a huge variety of ingredients and dishes, and they just keep growing over time, which makes the world feel like more interactive and dynamic. Those are some examples of MMORPGs with really, really, really expansive crafting systems. And the foraging, mining, and crafting aspect of gameplay is so satisfying that some game developers turned into a side system into like the foundation of their game. Those are some examples there. And likewise, life farming and social simulators, also known as cozy games, have become increasingly popular. These games offer like low stakes, combat-free, or sometimes combat optional experiences. Players can grow crops, gather ingredients, prepare food, basically turning like a daily routine into gameplay, which a lot of people find meditative and soothing. But you do have to watch out for those kitchen fires. And now there are countless casual games dedicated entirely to cooking food. There's a million of these, but these are a couple of my personal favorites. That's never been my Zen space, but I will say it is what got my wife back into video games in her adulthood, was the sort of cozy games of food preparation or even service and stuff like that. And most bafflingly was when her day job was working at a restaurant, she would come home and work these like restaurant sim games at night, which I'm still trying to get to the bottom of, like the psychology. I think it must be like the way we think our dreams try to help us work out something unresolved from our daytime. I think just the ability to like successfully get everyone out and see the hearts and money flow into you directly probably has to help her resolve whatever bad restaurant experience she had during the day. But so Probably right.
Games as therapy as well.
Games as therapy, I love it. Okay, so these days, even in games where cooking isn't the main focus, developers are finding fun ways to make food and cooking stand out. And I just had to give Vanillaware a little shout out because they have the most delicious looking food of any series ever. Most obviously, advances in technology have made it possible to create food that looks stunningly detailed and delicious. And particularly in the last 10 years, the bar has been raised for engaging cooking mechanics in games. These are some examples of very famous crafting mechanics in games. Which brings us back here. The more video games like really celebrate food and make food a focus, the more we want to make those foods in real life, which we will cover in our final segment. But first, do you want to say anything?
No.
Oh, you're good? Okay.
I would have taken that out if I had known.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Great. Okay, so recreating video game foods, it has some unique challenges and some unique advantages. For one, video games are a very, very visual medium, and there's an extra challenge in making the food at least somewhat resemble the game sprites. And, oh, oops, I'm sorry, I meant to go back. But that challenge is like mostly the same with drinks, except that now you have an intoxication debuff and everything is on fire. But nailing down the visuals was especially challenging with chunks from Starfield because chunks come in all kinds of varieties. It's like a bunch of different kinds of food. And the real ingredients don't always like staying in those neat little cubes. So I had to figure out, basically from chunk to chunk, how to make a recipe that folks at home could consistently replicate and get a result that was somewhat like the game. On the other hand, robust food crafting systems, like we were talking about before, these often include ingredients lists. So knowing at least some of those ingredients is incredibly helpful when creating functional recipes for these foods. It gives you sort of a place to start. But when the ingredients aren't known, you have to make an educated guess. Like in Breath of the Wild, the only confirmed ingredient for the Noble Pursuit is ice. And you can kind of like figure out things just based on the hints from the game. Like the drink is described as having a cooling effect. So to recreate this drink, I took a look at some of the game ingredients that like have a cooling effect and tried to find the real world equivalents. And I interpreted hydromelon as a watermelon and cool cephalina as lavender because lavender has a calming effect. And the drink is also implied to contain alcohol because the bartender will not give Link the drink because he is underage. So now I have enough information to craft a pretty unique and tasty beverage. And I made this recipe almost 10 years ago, and one thing I would definitely do differently now is use tequila because the drink comes from the Gerudo Desert. So when you don't have much information, taking inspiration from the environment and the setting is a great place to start. In the Mojave Wasteland from Fallout, maybe you use more desert-based ingredients like prickly pear or mesquite. And maybe also because it's Fallout, more processed foods with a long shelf life that might reasonably be around after an apocalypse. In the Yakuza series, the main location is a fictional district of Tokyo, so maybe you look at some Japanese street foods. And in The Witcher, you're in medieval Poland, so you look at some historical Polish recipes. And of course, if you are doing something for Donkey Kong, you use a lot of fruit and tropical ingredients. But this is one of the most common questions I get, which is, what if the food is supposed to be gross? And personally, I love this challenge. The reality is people seem to be kind of drawn to the unusual and the grotesque. And I would say about 25% of the recipe requests that I get are for foods that were deliberately designed to be unusual or unappealing in some way. Peanut cheese bar, not so much unappealing, but a little unusual. So what I usually do is break down, why is the food gross? Is it slimy? Is it bitter? Is there some kind of weird meat? And what real things can I use to emulate that? So often it's some kind of weird meat. But like maybe if it's bitter, I can use grapefruit, or if it's slimy, I can use okra. And if it's a weird meat, maybe there's a protein that will look and taste similar. But basically, how can I incorporate these unappealing elements so it feels authentic, but still make it delicious, or at least palatable? And I got to have a lot of fun with that concept in Diablo Drinks, Potions, and Elixirs from Sanctuary, which is coming out next month. This is like a bacon strawberry milkshake based on The Butcher, and it looks absolutely gnarly, but it's delicious, I assure you. And honestly, sometimes things aren't as gross as they might seem initially. For instance, the Sinner Sandwich in Deadly Premonition. The sandwich is made with turkey, strawberry jam, and cereal. And despite the unusual combination, this is actually delicious as written, assuming you use the right cereal and cheese. That fruity sweetness from the jam and like the crunchy, toasty texture from the cereal is like really good in a turkey sandwich. Please try it. So this very unscientific chart is what my personal approach to recreating video game foods is. And different creators may have their own unique paths, but for me, bringing video game foods to life is about finding the right balance between these things, and what I prioritize will change depending on the food. I do tend to prioritize flavor above all else, but you also have to consider visuals, what does it look like the thing, accessibility, can people find the ingredients for this wherever they are, accuracy, which is it kind of like what it's supposed to be like, and ease, like can the average cook make it? And that's, for instance, in Sunset Sarsaparilla, it's based on a real beverage from the 19th century, and it's made with sarsaparilla root, which is similar in flavor to root beer, but sarsaparilla root can be really, really hard to find. It's not going to be at your regular grocery store, but I feel like it's an essential ingredient for a reasonably authentic recreation of sarsaparilla. So, yeah. Oh, I actually had, got the opportunity to talk to Tim Kaine recently, the creator of Fallout, and he doesn't like sarsaparilla. Okay, so rock sirloin is one of my most requested recipes from the early days of my blog, but the item is literally rocks. So the big sacrifice here, of course, is accuracy. Rocks are not edible for humans or Hylians, so we have to hopefully capture the experience of it more than an authentic recreation. The Gorons describe it as crispy on the outside and meaty on the inside, so it's kind of like a beef Wellington. So that's what we did instead of actually eating rocks. And then finally the layered cake from Portal. Layered cakes are inherently difficult. They're time consuming, there's a lot of steps. Basically there's a lot that can go wrong. So in this case, ease took the big hit. But everything else, A+. Okay, I use this because this is kind of my final goodbye, but I use this because it's gonna be a little cheesy. There's no right or wrong way to recreate video game food. What I love most is seeing how a passion for stories and video games can kind of inspire people to start cooking. It's been the greatest honor of my career to be even the smallest part of that. Creating fan art, whether it's art, recipes, mods, it's kind of like writing a love letter. And I started the Geeky Chef as my own act of love for a game, and I wanted to share that love with my community. And sometimes like wonderful things come from just sharing what you love. And sometimes your love letters even find their way back to developers. And I have one final funny story. Back in 2012, there was a series of fan-made cocktails that were sort of floating around the internet. And in 2013, BioWare actually slipped an Easter egg into the Mass Effect Citadel DLC where you like reference those fan-created drinks. So it's kind of hard to like make this dialogue occur, but it's there. And so when I'm researching the official Mass Effect cocktail book, I find this Easter egg that they slipped in, and I'm like, oh man, this is a gold mine. I have so many cocktail ideas just from this. Totally unaware that these were originally fan creations. And so I have completely different interpretations of those drinks, which ended up in the Mass Effect cocktail book. And then I'm told that there's actually a mod that like adds them back into the game. So we have cocktailception. And that is it for the presentation. How are we on time?
Pretty close to dead on. So
Okay.
That's why. Yeah, perfect.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and here are a few more videos for you to check out.